Oh my, it's that time of year. Every time I go to the mail, it's baby shower, bridal shower, graduation party, and garden party. And I have no clue what to wear. I'm Vanessa with Ellie and Mac, and we're going to solve that problem today with the classic camisole dress and top. And we're going to get the perfect fit. Let's get started. My Saturdays are filling up with these little invitations, and I absolutely love going and celebrating all these wonderful people in my life, but it's really hard to know what to wear. And then not only what to wear, but what shoes to wear. Oftentimes you're walking in grass and your heels are sinking. So I want to be able to wear something that I can easily throw on some nice flats with and still feel beautiful. And this is where the classic camisole comes in. Not only is it just a beautiful flowy dress, but if you match it with some extra flowy fabrics, you're going to look not only lovely, but be extra comfortable. Now, the way to get this top and dress to fit perfectly is to make sure that you measure yourself correctly. So we're going to go over how to do your upper bust, your full bust, and your under bust measurement, making sure that this dress fits. And then we're going to be making a test top just to make sure that the darts are right where we would like them to be, and just to kind of check and see how the straps are on the sides. And then we're going to be diving right into these beautiful dresses. Okay, so let's start with the upper bust measurement. So this is exactly what it is going underneath your underarms and to your upper bust. And you're just going to be measuring right there. Now, as you can see, I'm at 32, and so this is going to be in the 2 extra small. This is what it looks like around the back. And then we're going to do the full bust measurement. So we're just going to come down just a little bit, and this is kind of going right along with your bra. You want to make sure you're wearing your bra during this. We're going to go, and mine is 34, about 33 and 3/4 to 34 inches. Now this is going to be putting me at the extra small. Now my under bust is 28 inches, and my hips will put me into a size small. So I am definitely pear-shaped here. So I'm going to start out at the 2 extra small, and then I'm going to come down to the extra small, and then right about my rib cage, I'm going to start coming out into the full small size. So that's a way that I'm going to make sure that my underarms as well as my chest fits into this camisole and my hips. Let's get started cutting.
I have all 3 sizes on my cutting mat. Now I know that the lines look like they're really thick, so I'm going to try to go on the outside edge to make sure that I get the extra small with my under bust. And then right when I get to the dart, I'm going to start moving it into the extra small. So you really want to make sure to fit your shoulders that you have the right measurement at your under bust. And then you can start grading out if your bust gets into a larger size from there. And then I'm just going to be grading in the small size to make sure that I have plenty of room for my hips and my waist. Now, here I'm going to be marking my darts, and sometimes it's just easier for me to mark first where they end, and then I go along the edge, and then I mark the fold line, and then I can iron this in half. So I have the air and water soluble pen here, and it's really hard. I'm going really light on my fabric, and I don't think you can see it very well with my camera, but it's just a very light line. Now this, when you put it underneath the iron, it does run the risk of becoming permanent with light fabric. And because I have the white here with the black, I want to make sure my lines are very light. So make sure you're really careful if you're using the marker. If that makes you nervous, you can definitely use chalk instead. But I have not had any issues with this particular marker. The problem is that it can stain white, and so if you're using it on cotton, I usually don't have a problem. But if your light fabric has any texture like a suede, it can leave white lines that can stain. So I only suggest this if you're going to iron the marker using it on cotton. Now I'm grading from the extra small to the small the same way I did on the front. I'm cutting it on fold to make sure that both sides are exactly the same. I'm using my quilting square to make sure the top and the bottom of my darts are going to be even, because even though a projector works really well, especially with patternprojector.com, that's what I'm using right here, I want to make sure that they are absolutely the same starting and ending point. Now, I like to use my quilting square to make sure that I'm getting those lines, especially with this type of diamond dart in. So here I switch over to the chalk to make sure that I can see it. And then again, I do one side and then the other and down the center. Now, where these lines actually cross is where my needle stays down. And then I can just rotate it to make sure that I have sharp angles on these diamond darts. And so you can see right here, I'm going to actually go past where they intersect just to make sure. And that's why I switched over to the chalk, because I do like to have that crossing there. And then this is the facing. So the facing is cut on fold, which I really like cutting it on fold to make sure, again, everything is even. I'm doing it the smallest size. So this is extra, extra small for me to make sure that it fits my upper bust, because this is where the facing is going to be. Once I've cut the facing, I'm going to lay these pieces onto my inner facing and I'm going to iron them to make sure that they stay. Now I have non-facing options that we'll go through as we continue through this video, but to begin with, I just want to show you how to cut the facing and how to work with it here. And so again, you're going to be cutting it on fold to make sure that both sides are even on the smallest size of your upper bust measurement. And then you're going to be making interfacing out of it. Now to give it a little bit more adjustability, I'm actually going to be cutting, so this is the straps. It's not the smallest or the halter straps. This is right here in the middle for the flat back version. And I'm going to be cutting these ones so I have the adjustability with making bows. So this is very helpful for me. Now here you see my straps here, and I just have already sewed them, and here's my facing with the interfacing sewed on, and I have serged the bottom. There's my darts and there's my back darts as well. So we're going to be starting at this point, and I'm just going to show that I like to baste in my straps at the top before I add the facing. Now, I don't like to clip it. Anytime anything is sandwiched, I definitely like to just baste it on. Now I'm going to clip it with right sides together, and then I like to mark it with chalk at the center. Now, the reason why I mark it with chalk is this is a 3/8 seam allowance. I want to make sure that I have a sharp rotation at that center line. And sometimes it's hard to tell where to rotate. And so you can get kind of off. And you want to make sure that you are right at the center or your top is going to look weird. So by just adding a little bit of chalk right there at the center, when my needle hits the center, I know that it is time to rotate and then start sewing down the 3/8. Now I'm going to just see how this looks, and then I'm going to take my scissors and just cut around, and I'm going to snip right in the center. So I'm cutting around where those straps are to make sure everything lays great. I want you to know that I am right here. I am ironing between each step here to make sure that everything is going to be perfect. Now, once I have this complete, you can see how cute the back is with those darts. I'm going to just do the exact same thing, repeating. I'm going to mark it with the chalk, and then I'm going to take it back over to my sewing machine with the 3/8 seam allowance. Now, where this is curving, you can definitely take your scissors if it's not ironing flat and just add some little snips to make sure that the curves are laying perfectly as well. You can understitch this or you can top stitch this, but I'm using a really good interfacing and I didn't have any problems with it laying correctly. And this is another tip that I like to do is I like to actually do the front and the back separate with the interfacing, and then I like to sew it down in the seams. Now you do run the risk if things are not lined up correctly to show a little bit on the sides, but I have noticed that if I sew it into the side seams with the rest of my top and bottom together, those pieces stay perfectly. So as you can see, now I'm going to be sewing them together. So instead of doing this facing sew together, I just sew everything into the side seams and it holds it down, and I don't have to top stitch it on, because sometimes the top stitching I feel like is not a detail that I want on the front of my shirt. I want it to look nice and casual. And then I'm just serging the bottoms, and then I can use that serge to roll it under, and that's going to give me, it's going to take about 1/2 inch, but I just really like having the rolled hem on a looser woven, just because sometimes it flips up and I don't want to show any of those serge lines. You can definitely use a cover stitcher here or even go 1 inch up with the hem.
Here's how my test top turned out, and I have to say I absolutely love this. It's fitted right in my chest, but then it comes out to a nice angle. I also love that I have the adjustable straps right here for a little extra detail. I also love that the darts are right where they're supposed to be. So I'm feeling really confident having this test made that my camisoles are going to be fitting absolutely perfect. I think that picnic top is so beautiful, and I can definitely see myself not only layering things underneath it, but definitely putting jackets on top of it. It's gonna be a piece that I'm gonna get lots of uses of throughout the year. Now, up next, I love this idea of the little delicate fat flowers. They're calling it floral bed sheets. I know that sounds like terrible, but it is a trend and I love the delicateness of the flowers. Now this is kind of a shiny fabric that I picked and it has these little dainty little purple flowers. But I wanted to take the tie trend just like I did with the picnic top and bring it to this dress. I also wanted to do some side ruching to make it a little extra romantic with some added bows. This, I'm going to show you how to do all the hacks for this beautiful dress.
So to not get repetitive, I want to show you where I'm at. So I've cut this exactly like I cut the previous top with the extra, extra small, too small. I've added the ties basted in as well as the darts. And you can see that I have my interfacing clipped on already. Now I'm just going to take it to my sewing machine and I'm just going to be sewing up those areas. And then I'm going to be left with the front and the back. So here's my front, and you can see how beautiful this fabric is. I just think it's just lovely. It's a little sheer, but it is absolutely beautiful. Now, I like to add the gather skirts on the front and the back. This is just another thing I like to do. It just makes it a little easier. So here's my back. I'm going to be adding the gathered to it. So here is that piece that makes it into a maxi. So normally it would be at knee length, but with this beautiful added piece, you gather it on and it just looks beautiful. Now this fabric, it is it's really thin, and so I can actually do a smaller gather. So this is only a 2.5 gather. It's a straight stitch, and you can see I have a seam in the back because I am like taking it so close with this fabric. I've had a few extra seams to make sure that this is going to work, and you can see that I'm making those very tight gathers right here. Now I have it clipped together with right sides together, and then as you can see, I actually like to gather on the seam allowance. So then when I'm sewing it to the top of the dress, then I'm sewing on that exact same seam allowance. This prevents the puckering. It also prevents you from having to do two different thread lines, and I don't jack up my tension when I'm doing the smaller gathers. I actually usually don't like to do the tension too high because I do feel like it leads to either the fabric being gathered too tightly and I run out of thread, or it leads to breakage. So here are both the gathers added onto my skirts. It's a little bit easier just to have that smaller area. You just want to make sure that you definitely line up all of these seams. So we're going to be lining up the gather seams, and then since we already have the facing done, we're going to line up that. But right here, first, I'm going to be marking 20 inches from the gather. Now I'm going to do an elastic. I decided to do it, I was going to do it 10 inches. But that seemed like it was a really hard stretch here. And I was a little too scared to do it. Now, it would have definitely lifted it up quite a bit, but it would have been harder to sew. So I went back and I decided to do it 14 inches. Now, this is just one where it depends on your elastic, really. It depends on your elastic. It depends on how much ruching you want. And I still wanted this to be a maxi. I didn't want to have like a ton of extra fabric around my waist. And so I'm doing this from my hips down to the bottom. And I wanted it to just have this really soft, beautiful gather and just a little extra detail. Now I'm just adding on this is Pico elastic. It's spelled like Bacot, and you guys know this is my favorite. It has a really great stretch, really great recovery, and I'm just doing a wide zigzag stitch and I'm adding it on to the side serge. I know normally we would iron these serges flat, but I want to use them. Now, normally would be doing like the casing and having it adjustable, but I just want the detail and I just want it to be easy. So that's why I chose doing it this method. And then here I'm just going to be sewing on some ties right there at the seam, and then it's going to make that gather look like it's intentional, like I have actual ties holding it up, and you can see it here. Now, this fabric is just perfect for this type of detail, and you can see how those side seams turned out. I just think this is absolutely lovely. And then it rained.
When I got done making that one and I tried it on, I did not want to take it off. It was so lovely, and I can tell that it's going to keep me cool on some of those hot summer days. The next one is this gorgeous lace I got, but this lace is kind of open to kind of bigger, and I was a little scared to do it in something that I was going to be wearing a lot of. I also wanted it to be breathable with the lace, so I got some really nice organic cotton to go underneath it as a layer, and I feel like the contrast between the dark and the light is absolutely beautiful. I also changed the tie so they're angling in a little bit more, and then I switched to the elastic in the back. This is such a lovely dress. And this one took me a little bit of time to kind of decide. I couldn't decide if I wanted it short. I couldn't decide if I wanted it long with a ruffle. And I'll let you see what I decided.
So, if you are not a fan of doing facing, doing a lace overlay is a great option. You can see I've added the darts to the cotton, but I have not added the darts to the lace because this lace is really open and I don't want to cause any mess within the lace. So, it's just easier for me. It does have a little stretch, so I felt like this would be the best option. Now I'm just going to be sewing this with my sewing machine with the 3/8 seam allowance like I would normally add on the facing. Now here I forgot it based on my straps, so you can see I had it just a little bit here. So basting is definitely the way to go. I forgot my own advice, but I'm just going to be sewing it on through the arm side for this little area. And I have my thread. I kind of switched back from matching my lace to matching my cotton depending on what I was doing. So this is how the front turned out, and I just feel like it's absolutely lovely. And then I have my back. Now, I like to treat the lace as and the cotton as one piece of fabric. You can do a true overlay where you actually sew the lace together, and I would do this if it wasn't so open. But because this lace is what it is, I decided to attach it to the cotton just to make sure that it was a little more sturdier. Now I'm measuring 1/4 from the end of my serge line that I've serged the lace and cotton together. I'm going to fold over on the chalk line and fold up that serge. I just really like having those finished details, especially when I'm using such beautiful fabric as this. I want it to look as professional as possible. And this is just a really nice way. It's just one of those details that's just for you. Yes, are you going to see the serge lines on the side with this? Absolutely. You can hide them with doing the lace and the cotton overlay, but this was just one of the details where I really wanted to make sure that it looked nice and beautiful on the inside as well as the outside. And you can see right here how it looks with just that line. And then now we're going to be adding on this 1-inch elastic. So we're just feeding it through. I have it with a safety pin. I'm just making sure that it's going through the cotton and the lace evenly. When I get to the end, before it sucks all the way through, I'm going to make sure I sew it on nice and tightly, and then I can continue pulling the safety pin through. I always cut the elastic about 1 inch wider than it needs to be, just to make sure that I'm going to have enough to sew it together. Now here is the front and the back coming together. I'm just going to sew up the side seams at the 3/8 seam allowance together, and then you'll see how lovely this turns out. So I did end up adding the ruffle, just the lace at the bottom, but this is how it looks with the straps. So I have the straps angled a little bit inwards to make sure that those stay on my shoulders. And you can see how they look right there. And then I'm going to just roll it up again to make sure I have all those finished edges. So I sewed it on and then rolled it up. And this is what it looks like. I think this is so beautiful. I'm so happy that I added the lace at the end. I was just going to hem it up, and I did hem it up. But this is just beautiful with the tie. I just love the contrast between these two very different fabrics.
I seriously had this dress 90% done before I decided to completely unpick it and add thread, unpick the hemline, and then add the ruffle. I cannot believe how much time I wasted, but it ended up turning out so beautiful. I love the contrast. I love the earthy tones, and I know I'm going to feel extra comfortable in this beautiful dress. Now, up next is my final dress, and it happens to be the one that I'm wearing right now. This dress is made out of fabric that is not very fun to work with. It is definitely one that frays very easily, and it's one that's kind of hard to sew. I'm going to show you how to handle all that. I'm going to show you how to get rid of the facing and how to do the elastic in the back, and we're going to be using bias tape here. And I'm going to show you how beautiful this hard to work fabric can be if we treat it correctly. And this one is one of my favorites.
I think we all have some of this fabric in our stash where it's just so sheer, it's hard to know what to do with it. So here I have the darts already placed in, and this is definitely a place that I want to make sure I'm adding in those straps right here and basting them in. Now, I have some vintage bias tape that I just had happen lying around, and it's just the perfect match for this. And so I'm going to be sewing this on. And I'm going to make sure that I take extra care not to get any folds in this. And so you're just going to take your time with it. I know that there's some right angles and we have the V, but just make sure you do your best here. And you're going to see how I go and handle one of those really sharp corners. So I'm just trying to make sure that I keep it open. I lift at my presser foot and I try not to go over the inside or the outside and cause any problems with the fabric. Now, when I'm actually top stitching this on, I am going to have to add in a little fold, but I don't need to add that in right here. Now you can see this fabric is already starting to fray, but it's so beautiful. Like I love the little glitter center of the flowers. I just think that is so pretty. Like I've wanted to use this fabric. I've had it for a few months and this was just a perfect thing for it. Now, once I get to where that V is, I'm going to again lift up my presser foot and rotate it with my needle down. And I'm just going to slowly work my way through this front of this bodice. Now, once I have it done, I have it over at my iron, and you can see it's looking really nice. And I'm going to just iron down the tape. Now, I am going to have a little right angle fold right there, and then I'm going to fold it down at the V. Now the V, we're going to handle it a little bit differently because this bias tape is not going to allow us to get that sharp corner. So I'll show you how to do that here in a second because I don't want the rounded edge. That's not going to sit right. That's going to definitely start pulling out. But again, I have the right angle right here that I'm going to steam in so I can make sure that both sides look identical. And then we're just going to top stitch this. I'm top stitching this at the 3/8 seam allowance and got a little off. So I had to unpick. It's sometimes really hard having the camera have a better view than I do, but I try to make it work. And you want to make sure that this slinky fabric is not bunching up underneath your needle. That definitely is something you're going to have to unpick, and this fabric does not like to be unpicked. So once you get done sewing that bias tape down and giving that nice finished edges, it's time to work out that V. And so I have it folded over on half, and I'm just doing a 45 angle right here on the bias tape. And once I get off the bias tape, I'm going to just let the needle fall off, and then I can iron it, and you can see that that V is nicely restored, and that's what it looks like on the inside. Now, we are going to be adding on the elastic to the back, but I'm going to be doing this a little bit different. Instead of doing the casing, which I'm not sure this elastic will be able to hold, I'm actually going to serge on that elastic onto the outside edges to finish the edges and prevent fraying, and then I can fold it over and top stitch it down. So this is a little hard because you need to make sure that you're stretching it. I'm also using a skin colored elastic to make sure that it blends together. But because this fabric is so sheer, you want to make sure that it's going to be matching whatever you're wearing underneath it. So the slip I'm wearing underneath it is skin toned, and so this works perfect. Now you can tell that this elastic is being stretched quite a bit, so I'm having to use the tail to help it go through my serger and then the actual fabric to get it all the way through. So take your time on this, make sure that you have it nice and even when you're stretching, and make sure that you're both capturing the elastic and the fabric without cutting too much off of either of them. And then once you get to the end, that's the hard part, right? Getting to the end and making sure that you keep your fingers out of the blade. And then once we get there, we can fold it over, and then we can top stitch that elastic down. So here we're back at the sewing machine, and I'm just going to make sure everything's lined up. And then I'm sewing this down at, this is 1 inch elastic, so it's sewed down at the 3/4 seam allowance here. And again, you need to stretch your elastic as you're top stitching this down to give that little ruched detail. Look how gorgeous that glitter is. Like, it does not show when I show the final dress how beautiful this glitter is. You can't see how sheer the fabric is because I'm literally showing this in the middle of a storm, but this fabric, you can really appreciate how beautiful it is, and it really was not that expensive to purchase. So sometimes these fabrics, they can be hard to deal with, and but they're worth the time. They're worth the effort to actually get this gorgeous ruche detail. And here we're going to definitely add the ruffle here. This is a tighter ruffle. This is another one that's at the 2.5. You know how I love my tight ruffles. And I have it sewed right there on the seam allowance. And just make sure that everything's even. The problem that I find with this fabric is sometimes the presser foot can get underneath those ruffles and start pulling them out, and then you get kind of a bunch of ruffles. So you just need to make sure that your presser foot is not pressing down too hard to make those ruffles uneven. And then you're just gonna kind of go from there. It was a little hard to see if the ruffles were even because, again, this fabric is so sheer, but when I got it underneath my sewing machine, I could see where I needed to kind of work it to make it look a little nicer. So here's the back, and then we're gonna be adding the front. Now, because I had a little shorter seam allowance on the top and the bottom, it ended up lining up perfectly, and you can see how beautiful it is right here. It's just this beautiful flowy dress, and you can add a tie to it, but I just really wanted it to hang loose, and if the sun was out you'd be able to see how sheer it is. But look how gorgeous. It's just absolutely beautiful. This is just so comfortable, and I feel like it's definitely a piece where I can put stuff over, I can put stuff under, I can add a belt, but no matter what I do, I'm gonna definitely be comfortable and cool in those hot summer months.
Just wearing this dress, I just want to twirl all day long. Like, it is so pretty. Oh, I feel so beautiful in it, and it breathes so well. I feel like I can put a jean jacket on it, or I can wear it as is on a date night or to one of these beautiful parties. So I'm so excited to have all of these. So not only do we learn how to do the facing, but we also learned that if we're in a bind, we can actually use some bias tape. We learned how to make tie shoulders that are adjustable in case you have a hard time fitting your shoulders, or how to just make the normal straps. We saw how to do the elastic back, and then we also gathered on the length of these beautiful dresses, and not to mention the ruched sides. There is so many different hacks that we can do with just a basic camisole pattern to make it absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for watching. I hope there's some tips that you'd like to take away. Put in the comments which one is your favorite. We love to hear from you. A like and subscribe would be amazing, and we wish you happy sewing. I'll catch you next time.